All right, guys. So welcome back to our little commentary slash tutorial, and this is where we left off the game. So we had the right and left movement, and we had the restraint so that it doesn't go outside of our little playing area. Now, of course, the camera is a bit of an issue, but we'll get to that probably in the next video, I guess. I'm not sure. I just want to finish up the car movement here. Yeah, and as we said, it does seem to be moving forward, and if I press the jump button, again, slow and lethargic. Look, game development is about like an endless amount of tweaking. That's what game development is. So as far as the actual gameplay experience is concerned, in most companies, or I mean that's just what I feel. That in most companies and stuff, this is really a design issue. The speed with which the car should be going, the speed with which things should be increasing. But if you're an indie developer, or if you're just someone who's developing alone, then you really have to go with your gut instinct, how the environment should look and what looks right and what looks wrong, which is a lot of pressure on people like us. But that is the case, and we are beginners, so well, you got to start from somewhere, right? So that's how it is. So yeah, it does seem a bit funny, but we will work on the tweaking. But at the moment, we're just going to keep on focusing on the game mechanics. And once we have some sort of a game instance, some sort of gameplay going on, then we can think about the tweaking part a little bit more. Okay, so now I want to go back to our car movement script, and I want to deal with where I left off on the on collision situation. Now I hope you guys were able to understand what I meant by can jump here. But that's exactly where I'm going to start. So everything is working fine. We set can jump to false. So that is when the person presses the jump button and we make the car jump this many units upwards, yeah, in the y direction, we set can jump to false. And now at a later point in time, we have to set it to true again, so that once the car has come to the ground again, the user can jump again. Okay, so here's what we're going to be doing. Now, we've finished move car, so I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. I'm also going to collapse update and start, just to clean up a little bit. I'm going to collapse this situation here. Okay, now I want to move on to these two. Now, they look very similar, but they're quite different. They are both Unity functions, I guess part of MonoDevelop, or sorry, not MonoDevelop, but MonoBehavior. And we have these two functions on collision enter, and as soon as you start typing them out, you'll probably see an auto complete. So go ahead and do that and make these two functions, and they basically take care of when our user collides with an obstacle or when he comes in contact with a pickup. Okay, so basically on collision enter basically fires every time our car or our game object collides with something. Okay, so basically what we need to be doing now, if you just for a second, if you just ignore the code here, okay, and if you just listen to what I'm trying to say, on collision enter, uh, will like the stuff in here will basically, the code in between these two brackets will run when our object collides with something. Okay, so if I go ahead and if I do something like debug.log, and let's just say, just for the sake of explanation, uh, we collided. Okay, so we expect that when our car collides with anything, this debug.log should show up. Now, we don't have anything to collide with, but if you're a smart cookie, you're probably still thinking, hey, wait, but we have this little floor here that we are colliding with. So you do expect, and I do expect it to fire at least once when our car falls to the ground. So let's just see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and open my console here. And let's try and hit play and let's see what happens. Okay, so right here, as you can see, we collided. Now our car is standing stationary, and it says that we collided. So as soon as the car fell on the ground and it touched the ground, our basically on collision enter basically fired. Okay, so this is where we will be checking if we hit something, such as another car object and so on. So the way we're going to do this is, let me just So now that you know that what's going on, we can come in here, and what we need to do is we need to be able to check what we are colliding with. So the kind of logic I'm sort of thinking is I'm just going to write some pseudocode, right? So if we collide with obstacle, then game over. Um, if we collide with the ground, then make can jump equals true. Because that just means that once we've collided, once we've landed again, then we should be able to jump, if that makes sense, okay? But essentially, the main point to take home here is that in on collision enter, that's where we will be dealing with our collisions and checking if the car collides with something or not. Now, ignore this bunch of code because I've written a lot of bunch of baloney. So we're just going to be doing this again, and just to make it easier for you, I'm gonna type this out. So over here we need to check what we're colliding with. Okay, so the on collision enter has this parameter collision, and this collision here stores the information about what we collided with. Okay, so what we can do is we can do collision dot game object dot name equal, and let's say we'll make an obstacle. Okay, so in this particular line of code, what I'm saying is get the collision, get the information of the collision, get the game object with which we just collided, and get the name of it, and check if the name of that object is obstacle, okay? If the name of that object is obstacle, then I want to finish our game. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy our game over function, okay? Now, just forget about what the game over does at the moment, but let's just go with it, okay? So I just saved it, and before I run it, actually, I want to say that else, okay? So the only things that we can really collide with in our game are either the ground or the other obstacle game object, okay? Now, you might have other things as well. You might have different types of obstacles. You might have different types of situations in different types of games. For example, I don't know, you might have, your player might collide with the roof, your player might collide with bullets, cars, NPCs, other environment things, water, whatever. So that's where you can basically come in and check. So in our game, there's just two sorts of collisions. We know that our car is either going to collide with an obstacle or it's going to collide with the ground. So I just thought that this is a nice time for me to just set can jump here to true. Now I could probably go in here and also check, if collision dot game object dot name is equal, and maybe set up, a tag for my floor or whatever, give my floor a name. In this case, it's just a cube. It's not going to be that way forever though, but just check if it's colliding with a cube and such. But since we know that we're either or situation, we know we're either colliding or with the obstacle or the ground, then this just becomes a little bit easier and convenient, okay? So that's about what I want to say. Now I'm going to save this code, and I want to see if we can get this to run. I'm going to also go ahead and remove this debug line, and let's make an obstacle. Okay, so let's make another 3D cube. Where is it? No. Create 3D object cube. Okay, so we have another cube. I'm gonna just pick it up, and we'll replace this with a car later on. In fact, why don't we just do that right now? We have the prefabs here, so let's just go in here and bring in this car. Boom. And so, okay, so let's see. Let's put it on 0, 0, 0. Oops. And just bring it straight up. Okay. And let's move it here a little bit, like so. Now to the floor. So this doesn't really matter, but just to, anyways. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put a collider on here, okay? Because because I guess this on collision enter, it's going to fire when there is a collision between the two colliders. Okay, so when the collider of my taxi, which we set up here, if you remember, this little box collider that we set up, here. Where is it? Box collider. Yeah, so this green little cube, when this collider hits the collider of this car, that's when we will have a collision. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of this just like so, very roughly, and I'm going to call it obstacle for now. Okay, because that's what we called it. Now, it's very important for this name and for this name to be the same. Okay, so what are we exactly saying? Let me just move this here. Move this here. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So here's what we're saying. We're saying on collision enter, this fires when the collider on this object collides with something, with another collider. Okay. And we're saying, okay, look, if you collided, if the name of that game object is obstacle, then game over. Or otherwise, if you're just colliding with something else, anything else, in this case, the only thing we can collide with is the floor. So in that case, let's just turn can jumps to true. That means he can now jump again. So let's just try and see how that works. Let's hit play and let's see. Okay, well, our camera is really off, but let's ignore that for a second and let's give it a speed of 1. Now, we can jump and we can jump and we cannot jump while we're in the air, but let's see what happens. Boom. Okay, so I think it would be a nice yeah, so the game has ended. In fact, as you can see, there is a collision, but things seem to be working the way we want. All I want is maybe just to come over here in game over and just do a debug log to say that game is in fact over. Game over. So we know that it's all working. Now, before I play this and just show you the debug log, I just want to say that in the game over function at the moment, we're just setting that game over boolean to true over here. So initially when the game starts, game over is false. And if you remember in the move function, that's like the first thing that we're checking. Okay, we're checking is the game over. And if the game is over, then we just keep returning. So it never runs this part of the code. The car doesn't move. You can't move right or left because it will never run this. Okay, make sure you understand that. What it does is every frame it comes in here and it's checking, and we're calling move car in update. So that's why it's running every frame. It's not just automatically running. We're calling it in update. Okay, so update is calling move car every frame. Every frame is checking, is the game over or is the game paused? Now, we don't have any way to pause the game right now, so let's ignore that. But is the game over? Now, by default, the game over is false. So it says, okay, the game is not over. Okay, I'm not going to run return. Okay, I'm not just going to exit out. It continues with the code, and you can move. The car moves and such. But what I want is when my player collides, when my player collides with an obstacle, I want to set game over. I call this function game over, and at the moment game over, all it does is it sets this variable true. Now I could directly set the boolean game over true over there, but the main reason why I have a different function is because this is where you want to deal with other things like scoring and menus and transitions and in my case some of the ads and such. And we'll get to that later. But if you remember from the demo, when the game over finishes, there's like a menu and such, and we'll get into all of that at a later time. But that's why I have a separate game over menu. But in this case, right now, I could simply just say game over equals true over here. You might as well do that if you want. Okay, so moving back, I'm gonna try and play it. Before that, I'm just gonna try to see if I can. My laptop is killing me. So if I'm just gonna fix the camera really quickly. I'm going to move it to 0 here now and a little bit closer maybe. And let's try and hit play again and see what happens. Okay, it looks horrible, but let's just ignore that because the camera is too close. But let's give our taxi a speed. Again, we can jump and such. And when I hit the car, let's see if I can hit it while jumping. Boom. Okay, so game over console.log, and as you can see, I pretty much rammed in pretty hard. You can see the colliders right here. Both of them jammed into each other. Okay, that's why on collision enter. That's why on collision enter worked. It checked. Okay, there is a collision. Is the collision with an obstacle? Yes. So I'm gonna call the game over function. Okay, so everything seems to be working like we want. Okay, let's remove the obstacle for now. And okay, so I've just disabled it for now. Okay, but we do have that functionality. The second thing I want to work with now is we also have some pickable objects. Okay, now having pickups in a game is very common. Okay, all sorts of games have some sort of collectibles, and that's kind of what we have in our game as well. Now you might say, all right, let's do the same thing over again, right? Let's make instead of an obstacle, let's have a game object. Let's give them a name pickup, and if there is a collision with that game object. And yes, it would work, and no, it would not work, because as I understand, for these collisions to work, that means both of the objects have to have colliders, okay? So, for example, let me go here, and since I don't have my little gem from the game, I'm just going to take this cube here. Let me show you what I mean, okay? I'm going to bring it here, like so. I'm going to set it at the right, like so, okay? And let's just see. Okay, let me just rotate it so it kind of looks like, well, some sort of a pickup, okay? I'm not really going to bother with giving it like a material or anything right now because this is super placeholder right now. I'm just going to move it a little bit lower to the ground, and it seems to be in front of the car. Now, let's imagine that this is our amazing pickup, okay? This is our gem or our heart or diamond or whatever. And at the moment, it has a box collider. Now, if I were to, the same logic that I applied with my obstacle, you see, if I were to do that, it would work. But the thing is, when the colliders collide, since the cube, or in this case, like our gem, let's call it pickup. So since our pickup has a collider, they would kind of be hitting each other, like ramming into it. My car would be ramming into it, and that means that there would be like a change in velocity, and it would be like a collision, and I don't want that. Okay, so what I can do is I can go over here on my box collider, and I can make it trigger. Now, what does trigger mean? Let me show you. As soon as I make my box collider trigger, and if I hit play, just watch what happens. I'm gonna speed up the taxi a little bit. So just notice that when my car comes here, look at that, it goes right through, okay? Now, to further impress my point, I'm going to remove this trigger, I'm going to play again, and I'm going to show you what happens now. Okay, so our car comes in here, this is a solid collider, and boom, do you see this? Now, this is a rock-solid collision, and I don't want that. What I want is, I want this to be a trigger. I want this to be there physically, but not really be that solid so that it jams and rams against my car. Because even though ultimately, as soon as they collide, I'm going to disable this one, there's still going to be a jitter. There's still going to be change in velocity because my car is going to ram into it, and I don't want that. So for that reason, I'm going to make my pickup a trigger. Now these triggers have a separate, not surprisingly, they have a separate Unity function called onTriggerEnter, okay? So this happens when a collider enters a trigger, okay? So we do pretty much the same logic over here, but for the pickup. So what we do here is we just check if other.tag, or in this case, we can also do other.gameObject.name is equal to pickup, okay? So over here, the return object over here was collision. Over here, it's collider, but everything else is the same. So if other.gameObject.name is pickup, I think this should work just as fine. Otherwise, I'll revert back to the tags and explain what tags are. And I'm just checking, is the other game object called a pickup? I'm going to go over here. I'm going to change it back to pickup if it lets me, okay? Because spelling right here is very important. And if it is, then what I do is I take other.gameObject.setActiveFalse. So if I am hitting if I'm hitting something with the name pickup, then I will disable it. okay? And over here we're talking about trigger because it is our car's collider entering the trigger of the other object, okay? So let's run this and see if it works. And I think it should work just fine, but let's just see. So when I hit 2 here, let's go back to our scene view. Our car is coming, and hopefully when they hit or touch, this should disappear. And sure enough, it works perfectly like we want. So that's what OnTrigger is doing. One thing I want to change here though is I want to revert back and just show you what I had before. So over here previously what I was doing was I was just checking if other.tag is pickup. In fact, I'm gonna change it back to what it was, and I'll explain tags later on when I do import the actual pickup prefab. So that's what we're doing with OnTrigger enter. So in this video, we went over obstacles, we went over our pickups, and we went over game over. Now the other commented out stuff, set speed. It's not important right now. Pause game, unimportant right now. Get pause state, not important. Get countdown, update timer, restart coins. Okay, so none of that is important basically. So we've got our core game mechanics as far as movement, collisions, and pickups are concerned. We've got them nailed. And I hope everything really makes sense so far. If you have any questions, please do ask. If you have any criticisms or anything that I can do to improve, please let me know. I know that a lot of you are probably not as comfortable with this kind of commentary style of tutorials, but I really do have to apologize. I really hope that this is better than nothing. I'm really kind of doing something in between for you guys, and I'm really hoping that this is fine. I'm really enjoying it so far. And I hope that it is helpful. And if it is helpful, do just drop a like, just drop in a comment, just say hi, just say anything, good or bad or whatever. It would really help me to know that there is actually someone out there and who's listening. And if there's any other thing that you feel that I need to improve on, even with respect to my coding, even though, as I said, that I'm using a lot of techniques which are not perfect, but I still feel that the techniques I'm using are beginner friendly, right? Now, I've constantly said repeatedly that, look, hey, don't use transform.translate, but look, no one's going to drive by and shoot you just because you use transform.translate, right? You're pretty safe, because that's just a natural way that anybody who's going to start with Unity is going to start coding. So yes, there are issues with this code, but I wouldn't really say that it's that bad, and that it's a perfect way to get started with Unity if you're new, certainly. So I hope everything makes sense, and I think we are pretty much done with car movement. So yeah, I'm gonna have to think about how we're gonna progress next, but I will see you soon. Bye bye.